Idioms. Let's talk about translating and interpreting idioms, which is actually a little different. The concept is the same, but I would use a different approach in translation versus interpreting. So what is an idiom? It is, of course, an expression that does not have a literal meaning. It is also called an adage, a saw, a proverb, and so on and so forth. Right? Let's take one or two examples and talk about how we can translate them. And the ATA, the famous ATA, the American Translators Association, accepts two types of translation on their exams. One is an equivalent, and one is semantically correct translation, but which is not an idiom. It's just not literal, but it translates the concept correctly. Okay, so let's take an example. In Russian, we have an idiom, между молотом и наковальней, which translates literally as between the anvil and the hammer, between the hammer and the anvil. And see, I just learned something. The videographer said that in Old English this was also used. I've never heard it. But let's talk about what we could do with this, right? This actually lends itself very easily to a direct equivalent between the rock and the hard place, between the devil and the deep blue sea. So here, there is really no reason to step out of the boundaries of being quote-unquote normal, and we could just run with what the ATA suggests. Why not? And if you didn't think of it, you could just say between two difficult situations, between two bad scenarios, and so forth. But what are the other two, right? Well, I could say between the hammer and the anvil, and see, my intuition told me that it's good. Then I doubted myself. Never doubt your intuition. Then I found out that actually it was used in Old English, which probably means it comes from a common source, right? There is also, this is a different Russian expression, but it would also work in English, except you have to think of the context and the target audience. You could say between Scylla and Charybdis, and those are two actual places. I always forget which one is the rock and which one is the whirlpool, the maelstrom, but they were very preeminent in Greek and Roman mythology because sailors and seafarers would always die between Scylla and Charybdis. One was a rock, one was a whirlpool. Sorry, I forget which one is which, but you could say that, but only if you're talking to like educated people who know classical mythology or literature and so forth. So that is also an equivalent. Now I kind of strayed from the topic. So just to repeat myself: 1, direct equivalent; 2, just semantic meaning; 3, use the original if it would make sense, if it's figurative enough to make sense in any language. For example, like we have another one in Russian, без труда не вытащишь рыбку из пруда. Of course, that also rhymes. So it has the added benefit of rhyming. So I could say something like, if you never cast a line, no fish will come say hi. Of course, that doesn't make total sense. But we were actually discussing this with Eric, the videographer. See, now you're famous, Eric. What exactly the translation would be. And we thought of different ideas, all of which are good, but none of which is a direct equivalent. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, yes. But that talks about being risky, and in the Russian idiom there's nothing about being risky. It just means without work you never get the results. No pain, no gain, yes, but that has a connotation of like suffering or pain, and the Russian has no connotation of suffering or pain. So would I roll with this in interpreting? Probably. In translation, I would become a word nerd and I would actually keep looking. But let's go back. So, and what is the fourth one? The fourth one would just be to invent your own. Like, for example, if it's between the rock and the hard place, right, between the hammer and the anvil, you could be like, I don't know, between the prosecutor and the police, or I was just told in Japan, they say between two iron mountains. Or you could invent something else, between lightning and thunder, between a vampire and a witch. I don't know, it would work, right? So to recap, what are the 4 ways? And maybe there are 5. And maybe there are 6, but number 1, direct equivalent. Number 2, just semantic meaning. Number 3, translate the original if it makes sense. And number 4, invent your own. So voila, the ATA is right, but I say there are 2 more ways. And if there are 5 or 6 or 7, please write me, and I will be forever grateful, supercalifragilistically, expialidociously grateful. Out for now, ciao.